takers. You gotta be careful what you choose with that. There are a lot of people
Laura,
don't go
can we
with
get
the
started?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Start.
Yeah.
Hello, how you doing? Hi. Does everyone have their Siddurim? Sam, would you like one?
Yeah, would you want me? Yeah, one.
Make sure.
If she did.
Good.
Marshall's over there. I have no idea.
You got one?
Yes, thank you.
It's Sam, correct? Yes. Okay. All right. Sam,
We're an
Sam.
unfriendly group. Huh? We're a very unfriendly group. Unfriendly. Yes.
It's been wonderful.
He wants
I
to say this.
seriously appreciate it.
Huh?
I told them, I think they, my work's not my, not their case, but my hands are out, and they're supposed to be delivered. This is somewhat of a hearing test.
Okay.
All right.
Rabbi?
Yes.
You may have to speak a little louder so Sam gets the full appreciation.
Sam, can you hear me? Oh, is it
What'd you
hearing
say?
me? Can you hear me? Yes? You can hear me? Okay.
They stay together?
Okay. We're going to begin our service on page 6 of our Siddurim. Page 6 with Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boechem Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Mamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barhuni l'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seitchem l'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now turn to page 7 of our Siddurim. Page 7 is a responsive reading. I'd like to invite up this evening for our responsive reading. Pam, would you like to lead us in the responsive reading on page 7? It's in English.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, the blessing of the candles on 8.
Yeah. Are you able to do the blessing on page 8 as well? If not, I'll lead it.
You can do it in English.
You can do it in English.
All right, better. Yep, that's the
Okay.
one I remember.
Okay, very good. You
We
just
like
stand
the
right in
young
front of the.
people to do these.
You can come up here. It's
Come
fine.
on. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Come, let us welcome Shabbat.
May His radiance illuminate our hearts.
Light is the symbol of the divine.
The eternal is my light and my salvation.
Light is the symbol of the divine within us.
The human spirit is the light of the eternal.
Light is the symbol of the divine law.
For the mitzvah is a lamp and the Torah a light.
Light is the symbol of Israel's mission.
I, the eternal, have made you a covenant people, a light to the nations. Very good. And then do the blessing right in front of the candles.
All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. Blessed are you. Yeah.
Blessed are you, O eternal, our God, who makes our lives holy through divine mitzvah and has commanded us to kindle the Shabbat lamp.
Amen.
May the eternal bless us with Shabbat joy.
Amen.
May the eternal bless us with Shabbat peace.
Amen.
May the eternal bless us with Shabbat holiness.
Amen. Very good job.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
No problem. We're going to continue now on page 9 with Lecha Dodi, page 9. Lecha Dodi Likra Kala Yadada 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 Pene Shabbat Nikabela Lecha Dodi Likra Kala Yadada 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 Pene Shabbat נקבלה שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל חנוכת, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם תפארת ולתהילה, לחיידוי לקרא קלה ידדי 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 פני שבת. נקבלה לחיידוי לקרא קלה ידדי 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 פני שבת. נקבלה לקראת שבת לכו בנלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במקשה תהילה, לחיידוי לקראת קלה ידדי 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 פני שבת. נקבלה לחיידוי לקראת קלה ידדי 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 פני שבת. נקבלה היא אורי, kiva orech kumi ori, shir daberi, kavod Adonai, alai negila, lechaydoy dili, grakala, yedadai, b'nei Shabbat. Nekabela, lechaydoy dili, grakala, yedadai, b'nei Shabbat. Nekabela. Now we rise and face the entrance or exit of our sanctuary. Boi v'shalom atzeret ba'ala, gam b'simcha u'b'tzola, tov emune am sigula, boi kala, lechaydoy dili, grakala, yedadai, b'nei Shabbat. Nekabela, lechaydoy dili, grakala, yedadai, b'nei Shabbat. Nekabela. Remain standing now for the Hatzi Kaddish on page 11 of our Sidurims. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, B'yalmadi rachirutei v'yamich malchutei, B'chayechon u'v'yoymechon u'chayei decho beit Yisrael, Ba'agala u'bizman kariv, V'yameru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach, Le'olam Elomei Almaya, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitfa'ar, V'yitraman, V'yitnasei, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shemei Kudusha, Rehu, Le'elam Kol Birchata V'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata damiran b'alma v'yameru Amen. Remain standing for the Baruch Hu on page 12 of our Siddurim. Baruch Hu et Adonai ha'mevorach, Baruch Adonai ha'mevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Turn to page 13 now with the italicized text in English. We'll join together in the English reading. Eternal God, your majesty is proclaimed by the marvels of earth and sky. Sun, moon, and stars testify to your power and wisdom. Day follows day in endless succession, and the years vanish, but your sovereignty endures. Though all things pass, let your glory not depart from us. Help us to become co-workers with you and endow our fleeting days with abiding worth. Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim. Blessed are you, O Eternal, who brings on the evening. On page 14, I'll read the translation for Avat Olam. With eternal love, you've loved your people Israel, the house of Israel, Torah and commandments, statutes and judgments. You've taught us, therefore, O Eternal, our God, when we lay down and when we rise up, we will discuss your statutes and rejoice in the words of your Torah and your commandments forever. For they are our lives and the length of our days, and we will meditate upon them day and night. May you never remove your love from us forever and ever. Blessed are you, O Eternal, who loves the people Israel. Page 15, we'll join together for the Shema prayer. Customarily, we cover our eyes for the Shema on page 15. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kivod Yehod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. You may be seated. V'ahavta is on page 16. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinatam levanecha v'divarta bam Meshivtecha bevetecha uvletecha baderech ushachbecha uvkumecha ukshartam neot al yadecha behayula totafot bein einecha ukchatam al mizuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru va'asitem ekol misotai Behitem kidoshim lelolechem Ani Adonai Elohechem Asher hotzeiti etchem Me'eretz Mitzrayim Liot lachem Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem. And next. Page 17 will join together once again in a responsive reading. Eternal truth is that you alone are God, and there is none else.
May the righteous of all nations rejoice in your love and exalt
Justice.
Let them beat their swords into plowshares.
Let them beat their spears into quivers.
Let nation not lift up sword against nation. Let them study war no more.
You shall not hate another in your heart. You shall love your neighbor as yourself.
Let the stranger be in your midst, be as to you the native, for you were once strangers in the land of Egypt.
From bondage we went forth to freedom, so let us be free and sing with joy.
Join together in singing Mi Chamocha on page 18. Mi Chamocha Balim Adonai, Mi Chamocha Nedar Bakodesh, Nohora Teilot Osei Fele. Malchutecha ra'u banecha bokeyam lifnei Moshe, Ze Eli anu v'amru, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed, V'ne'emar ki fada Adonai et Yaakov, U'golom yad hazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. On page 19 we have a translation for Hashkivenu. Cause us, O Eternal our God, to lie down in peace and to awaken us each morning to renewed life with strength. Spread over us the holy shelter of your peace.
Help us to order our lives by your counsel and lead us in the paths of righteousness. Be a shield about us, protecting us from hate and war, from pestilence and sorrow.
Curb also within us the inclination to do evil and shelter us beneath the shadow of your wings. Guard our going out and our coming into life with peace from this time forth forever.
Blessed are you, O Eternal, whose succor of peace spread over us, over all God's people Israel, and over Jerusalem.
Page 20 will join together for Vishamru. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoretam berit olam Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoretam berit olam B'nei u'bein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam oti le'olam oti le'olam V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoretam berit olam Ki she'jamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoretam berit olam Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash Vishamru B'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat La'asot et ha-Shabbat le'doretan berit olam. We now rise for the Amidah prayer found on page 21. Page 21. Adonai sefatai titach ufi yagi tehilatecha Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avoteinu ve'imotenu Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol, Ha'gibor V'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Hasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Hasei Avot V'imahot, Umevi Geulah Lifnei B'neichem, L'man Shemo B'Yahava, Melech Ozer U'Mashiach U'Magin, Baruch atah Adonai Magin Avraham D'Ezrat Sarah Atah Gibor L'Olam Adonai Mechaye HaKol Atah Rab Lehoshia Mashiv HaRuach U'Marid HaGashem Mekakel Chaim B'Chesed Mechaye HaKol B'Rachamim Rabim Soimech Noflim B'Rofei Cholim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Lishene Afar Michamocha Baal Gevurot Umidom Melach Melech Memid Umechaye Umatzmiach Yeshua V'ne'emanata Lecha Hayot HaKol Baruch atah Adonai Mechaye HaKol Atah Kadosh U'Shem HaKadosh U'Koshim B'chol Yom Yihalelucha Selah Baruch atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. Now daven silently and afterwards we'll join together for Oseh Shalom on page 29. join together now for Oseh Shalom on page 29 of our Siddur readings. Oseh Shalom Imromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Imru Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael. V'yameru Amen. So temporarily very relevant to this week's Torah portion, especially be Parshat Lech Lecha. Anyone want to take a guess as to why? Identity is front and center in this week's Torah portion. It finds its way at the very inception of the Jewish people. The birth of the Jewish people is forming in this week's Torah portion, and temporarily very relevant to where we are today with current events, maybe the story of Lech Lecha. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. Recall in last week's Torah portion, we were in Parshat Noach. We learned about that flood that seemed to wipe out all of humanity and the rebirth and rebuilding that was a necessity in the wake of destruction. In our first Torah portion, we read about the creation of man and the first humans and the responsibility of humans to protect and guard our planet. No greater person may exemplify that vision best other than Noah. The dedication to life of building an ark for the creation of all humanity and for all animals was an awe-inspiring calling for a single human. Yet the outcome would assure the survival of a planet. The calling of Noah is a calling that we should all hold near and dear to ourselves. Our planet, our Garden of Eden that we hold as a modern iteration, is that which we reside in. And the end of Noah concludes with the saga of the Tower of Babel, followed by an extensive genealogy that led from Noah to Abraham to the 10 generations. Abraham is where we begin this week's Torah portion now. And we begin with Parshat Lech Lecha. God speaks to Abraham, commanding him, Lech Lecha, go from your land, from your birthplace, from your father's house, to the land which I will show you. There, God says, he will make you a great nation. Abraham and his wife Sarai, accompanied by his nephew Lot, journeyed to the land of Canaan, where Abraham built an altar and continued to spread the message of one God. Abraham and Sarah leave the land of Canaan during a famine to Egypt, and in Egypt Sarai is taken to become a mistress of Pharaoh and freed only once Abraham can pay for her release. Once the famine subsided, then they returned to the land of Canaan. And in Canaan, Sarai and Abraham will part ways from Lot. Sarah and Abraham try to conceive, but they struggle. Abraham at this point takes on an Egyptian maidservant, and through Hagar, they conceive a child named Ishmael. 13 years from the birth of Ishmael, though, something bizarre happened. Sarah and Abraham decide to change something about themselves. They changed their names, their fundamental spiritual orientation. Sarai becomes Sarah, and Avram becomes Abraham. Abraham chooses to abide by a new custom, to circumcision, as a marker of his covenant with a newfound faith in one God from generation to generation. In return, Sarah and Abraham are blessed with a son named Isaac. There's much going on in this week's Torah portion, and here we're talking about the very birth of the Jewish people. This is the genesis of our people, and it is found in this week's Torah portion. But what are we born into? What is it that makes us Jewish? Imagine again the birth of Isaac for a second. Sibling rivalry reminds you a little bit of this story. We seem to have been born into a world with this question of birthright sitting upon our shoulders. After all, it is not Ishmael who was born. Is it not Ishmael who was born first? It was. So what is it that separates ourselves from the Ishmaelites and others? There is two major narratives of history that diverge from one another in this week's Torah portion. In Islamic tradition, Ishmael at 13 is now circumcised, and he is the heir to Abraham's lineage and birthright. Our tradition is that Isaac becomes the birthright, And what separates Isaac and Ishmael is not years of age, but instead it is clearly an equally important figure not discussed enough in our Torah, and that is their mothers, Sarah and Hagar. The faith of Sarah is dissected briefly in this week's Torah portion. She's identified as the first Jewish woman, but Hagar's faith remains elusive. She, according to rabbinic narratives, retains her Egyptian beliefs. This is the determination of who will carry on the birthright of the Jewish people through their names. Names signify a marker of identity in antiquity and again today. And in antiquity, an Egyptian name like Hagar was something tied to their belief system. And early Jewish people were no different. Our names had specific meanings in Hebrew and were for an adoration of God. However, identity was something as powerful in antiquity as it is today. And over the past 4 decades, there has been a reemergence of identity, politics, religion, and liberation of movements globally. From the 1950s and earlier, identity in America and elsewhere was highly collectivized and was moving towards a general trend of universalization. And the story of the 4 chaplains during the Second World War who died in prayer together epitomized this best. And we'll be learning a little bit about that and talking perhaps a little bit about that with Veteran Shabbat coming up soon. But for American Jews, this was a time in our history, the 1930s and 40s, when we had chosen to change our names very times often, from Goldstein to Gold, from Steinberg to Sandals. It was also a rather miserable part of our history, full of abject discrimination against Jews. In order to make it big in business or belong to country clubs, Jews had to hide their identity. Hollywood was no different, and many actors had to conceal their identities. They had to change their names during a period of anti-Semitism and an underbelly of universalization. It was not easy to be a Jew during those times, during a period in America of collective identity. Yet for all of this began to change in the 1970s and 60s in particular, and identity began to transform something that was universal into something that was much more specific for American Jewry. Suddenly, American Jews and others, they were proud to be different and not to be part of a universal collective. Women's liberation organizations began to emerge, black empowerment movements did as well, and those voices began to be heard. And in accordance to those changes, the Jewish world was ready for a revolution. Suddenly, the reform movement situated itself upon not universalization of collective identity, but instead upon particularism. Today, we have seen marked improvements, though, in our equality. Has it, though, made being a Jew easier? Identity is as central to our people then as it is today. It still has immense power. But your name is an inflection of the power given to you by your parents, by your family, by your chosen identity. It's yours. No one can take that from you. Let today be an opportunity for us to affirm our identities. And we see that here today. Look around, we see new faces. We see Pam, Sam, people who were otherwise not going to perhaps be here this evening, but we're part of affirming our identity here tonight at synagogue. It's a powerful message to be a part of, and thank you for being part of that message with us. May our names and their names be honest to our calling to the Jewish people and as Jews. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be God's will. Amen. We now turn to the Misha Barak prayer. It can be found at the very back of our Siddurim. Misha Barak prayer may be found at the back of our Siddurim. Tomorrow the names from our Misha Barak list will be read aloud. However, if there are any names anyone would like to add to the list and they will not be here tomorrow, please share with us the names of any loved ones or individuals that they would like to pray for healing of mind, body, and or of spirit.
Stephen Carroll Lichtenstein.
Stephen Carroll Lichtenstein.
Sheila Kuchiak.
Sheila Kuchliak.
Larry Schuster.
Larry Schuster.
Yvette Zamos.
Yvette Zamos.
Michael Berkovitz.
Michael Berkovitz. Sherry Friedman.
Sherry Perlman.
Sherry Perlman. Thank you.
Marcia Ponce.
Marsha Ponsky.
Ponce.
I thought it was Ponce. You've said it a few times, and
Sorry.
Alan and Barbara Steinberg.
Alan and Barbara Steinberg. Are there any additional names? Okay. We'll rise as the ark is being opened. Misheberach Avotenu Mekor Habrecha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach Imotenu Mekor Habrecha Le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Remain standing now for the Aleinu prayer found on page 30. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'teit yidula l'yotzeh b'reshit, shelo asanim k'yaratzot, v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam pelkeinu k'achen, v'gor aleinu k'kol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, Umishtakavim oimotim Lifnei melech malchei hamachim Hakadosh Baruch Hu Shehu notei shamayim veyoser haaretz Umoshev yekaro bashamayim mima'al Ushchinatu zo Begov hei meroimim Hu Eloheinu enot And mitmalkeinu efesulato kakatu v'torato v'yadata hayom v'hoshevota el avecha ki Adonai hua Elohim bashamayim mima'al v'yal ha'aretz mitachad and old. We continue with the italicized text on page 31 and 32. We therefore hope in you, O eternal our God, soon to behold the splendor of your might. Then will false gods vanish from the earth, and the idols will be utterly cut off, to heal the world through the sovereignty of the Almighty. Then will all acclaim you as their God, and forsaking evil turn to you alone. Let all who dwell on earth acknowledge that unto you every knee must bend, and every tongue swear loyalty. Before you, O eternal our God, let them humble themselves to your glorious name. Let them give honor. Let all accept the yoke of your dominion, that you may rule over them soon and forever. For the dominion is yours, and you will rule in glory. As it is written, the eternal will reign forever and ever. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz Bayom hahu Yihyeh Adonai echad U'shemo echad. You may be seated. We'll do announcements first because I have to find the yahrzeit list.
When is Liz doing her veteran? She was going to read the thing about her father.
Yeah. Yeah, you would. Yeah.
Okay.
Right into the announcements after that.
Can you do the announcements right after?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have to as well find it gives me enough perfect time to collect the yahrzeit list because our kids, I think they hit him again.
But this time we think we know what kid.
We know what kid. We know what kid. We've done a full thorough investigation in this one. We've done a full thorough investigation. He was here today.
Can I guess which kid?
Yes, he was here. He was the only kid. No, there were two kids here today. He was the last kid to leave today.
Shabbat Shalom.
Good Shabbos.
Obviously, I'm not a veteran, but
Are
my,
you going to do it from there, so it's on the,
Well, we can also say which kid turned this off today too.
okay.
Yeah, Yeah, but the camera's here.
The
right?
camera's here, it's better
Okay.
that you do it here.
Can you move it down?
Yeah.
Is this on camera? You want
It is on camera.
it? Okay.
Yes, you're on camera.
Hi. My father, William Offenberg, escaped from Poland in 1939. He was in the United States less than 6 months when he volunteered for the New York National Guard. At that time, the United States had not yet entered World War II. He hardly spoke any English, and then Pearl Harbor was attacked. My father served in the Pacific Front. He was in the infantry and was involved in 5 battles, including the Battle of Macon Island and the Battle of the Gilbert Islands. He had over 39 months of overseas active combat duty. After years of service, he and many other soldiers were officially declared U.S. citizens on the island of Hawaii. After the war, he first became the commander of the Bronx Jewish War Veterans, then the vice commander of the New York State, and later, when he moved to New Jersey, the commander of the Kaufman-Harris Post in Passaic County. My father also served as the chairman of the Bronx County Crusade for Freedom, during which time he broadcasted for Radio Free Europe to the Iron Curtain countries. He was later presented with a plaque by General Lucas D. Clay for his effective broadcasts that helped fight communism. During the war, he wrote many letters to my mother, whom he had met on a blind date just before he enlisted. She submitted one of his letters to a newspaper for a contest. The winner would get $5 in war stamps. It was for the best letter from a man or woman in the service. This letter from my father, who was an immigrant, who had just learned English months before, was the winner. Here is his letter. I was somewhere on a ship in the Pacific when the news reached me that I was going into action. For the first few hours after hearing it, it really affected me. This is it, I thought, the real McCoy. After that, I took it very calmly and spent most of the time aboard ship playing chess, and I didn't lose a single game. Most of the time, I felt unworried and sure of myself. But from time to time, especially the day before the invasion, I felt a little depressed. But we all joked and passed the hours. The next morning, after going through the most difficult obstacles, up to my ears in water, I reached the islands. It felt good to be on land again. I was in charge of the evacuation of the wounded men in the front lines. I was under fire almost constantly. After going through the first reaction of being under fire, I got so used to the noises of machine guns, mortars, and hand grenades that I just didn't care anymore. I was busy all the time and had very little time to think of myself. But the nights, they were the longest of my life. I laid in that foxhole, and the firing didn't stop for a second, and I had no peace of mind. I knew with a cold mechanical reasoning that I could die at any minute, and I faced the possibility of death without a quiver in my diaphragm. I pressed my hands close to my head and tried to pack every moment of enjoyment that I ever had in my life. That was my first experience in combat. It's all over now, and yet I can still see it before my eyes, all those scenes. I still feel like listening to the ground every time I hear a shot or a noise. Signed, Private First Class William Offenberg. Now, I found this short poem in one of his scrapbooks. I'm not sure if he wrote it or if he copied it, but it just goes so perfectly with the letter. Look, God, I have never spoken to you, but now I want to say, how do you do? You see, God, they told me you didn't exist, and like a fool, I believed all this. Last night, from a foxhole, I saw your sky. I figured right then and there they had told me a lie. Had I taken time to see the things that you made, I would have taken the time to pray. I wonder, God, if you would shake my hand. Somehow I feel that you would understand. Funny, I had to come to this hellish place before I had time to see your face. I guess there isn't much more to say, but I am sure glad I met you today. I guess the 0 hour will soon be here, but I am not afraid because I know you are near. Well, God, I have to go. I like you lots. This I want you to know. Look now, this will be a horrible sight. Who knows? I may come to your house tonight. Though I wasn't friendly to you before, I wonder, God, will you wait at your door? Look, I am crying, I am shedding tears. I wish I had known you all those many years. I have to go now. Goodbye. Strange, since I met you, I am not afraid to die. And where's the camera?
Camera's right over there.
Here.
It's right there.
And this is a picture of my father in his Jewish war veteran's uniform. Announcements.
First, we'd like to. Jay, you're going to share it as well? You look.
Jay.
Jay, did you want?
Yes. Come on up. I had confirmation from Jerry at the last minute, and I just want to make sure that you're
Yeah.
able to. So, you can just stay up there. It's fine. So, is anyone familiar with different methodologies into official channels and responses to anti-Semitism in the United States? Of course, we have the ADL, of course, law enforcement agencies. Believe it or not, Jewish war veterans are assisting and assist typically governmental organizations in combating anti-Semitism. So today, we have Jay, who will be sharing with us a little bit of his story as a veteran.
No, I'd like to add something to your father. My father got dropped into Paris in May of '42 because he spoke a few languages. All right? He was captured twice. All right? First time he was captured by the Nazis in Paris, and the second time at the Battle of the Bulge. All right? It didn't matter. My father never said a word of what happened to him. I didn't find out anything. I'm sure the same thing dealing with your father. They didn't talk. They didn't say what was going on. I didn't find out about what my father did until after he died, and I found some of his papers. I didn't know he got 3 Bronze Stars and 4 Purple Hearts until he died. And I'm sure your father got just as many. It was sort of like everyone back then volunteered, or they got drafted, but it was the same as volunteering. It didn't matter. It was like, what was going on, we had to protect ourselves because the government of the United States was not so friendly towards us being Jews. Roosevelt might have been a great man, but he forgot to bomb the railways to Auschwitz. He said, some people said that it was because he didn't want to disrupt the reconstruction of Germany. What's a few railroad ties or rails compared to a Jewish life? Or what happened to all the 600 or so Jews who were on the St. Louis who never got, maybe I think 5 or 10 got out of Auschwitz. The other day I was talking to a close friend of mine. His mother was from the camps, and his father was a Polish partisan. It was just the time we did it. And when you look at things today with anti-Semitism, it's going back. The rabbis, I disagree with one thing you said.
How's that?
What I say is, well, my grandfather sold paperboard and box in the Adirondacks. When he was there, he couldn't sleep in any of the hotels. He had to sleep in his car because they didn't allow Jews or dogs or Negroes. They didn't, and they had signs. That's why we had the Borscht Belt, because they wouldn't allow us in the Adirondacks. There are so many places where us as Jews couldn't buy land because restrictions said you cannot sell to them. And that was legal. we're going back to the 1960s and the 1950s. In the 1940s, yes, they recognized us because that was one of the good things about Franklin Roosevelt. He recognized that we had to integrate the armed services. And it wasn't just integration of the blacks, it was the integration of those who were Jewish. All right? They allowed us in. It's like this article I read when I was, my father had, when I was a kid. I read this. He had this article in the New York Times that said, well, at Harvard University, we're having too many Jews going to the medical school, and we have to reduce them because they're a bad influence. So, things are changing, we are going back, and we're still fighting for what our great-grandparents came here for, or for our grandparents or our parents, because things are going backwards. And yes, the Jewish War Vets is a great organization which I belong to, and I'm happy to be part of that.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. All right,
Yes. Announcements.
announcements now.
You're finished?
No.
You didn't expect him to say yes.
Yeah, my father also talked about anti-Semitism in the service. When he was going for training in Alabama, he said it was very, very difficult.
Yes,
Okay, let's move on to announcements. Saturday, November 5th, worship is virtual and in person. Torah study 9:30, worship at 10:15 a.m. Avi Wishner, our cousin, is going to have a performance on in West Windsor Arts, Saturday, November 5th, 7 p.m. More information on the weekly email. Rutgers Jewish Film Festival, October 30th to November 13th. How Saba Kept Singing is about cousins Avi Wisner's grandfather. Avi will be there for questions and answers. At the 3:30 show was sold out. A lot of us are going to the 6:30 show, and I believe there's still tickets available. Blood Drive, Sunday, November 6th. You can still make an appointment online. Election Day, Tuesday, November 8th. Be sure to vote. Sisterhood, Tuesday, November 8th at 7 p.m. That should be, what?
7:30.
7:30. That should be a lot of fun. We're going to be making Hanukkah cards. Social Action is Wednesday, November 9th on Zoom. The Bar Mitzvah of David Brown will be November 12th. More information about his Bar Mitzvah project on our weekly email. The parents and grandparents are going to have a kiddush lunch. If you're interested in attending, please call the office so they can have a count. Okay, 5th, 6th grade will lead the service on November 18th, and Avi will be there. Tuesday, November 22nd at 6:30, Interfaith Thanksgiving Dinner here at Etz Chaim. Bring a dish to share and a non-perishable food item to donate to the local food bank. More information on weekly email. Jack Kusher, our former cantor, is in an off-Broadway play called A Tomato Can't Grow in the Bronx. If you would like tickets, there is more information on our weekly email. Thank you.
Liz,
Yes, what did I forget?
Sisterhood, we'd like to know who's coming, so we know how much supplies to bring.
If you're coming to Sisterhood, please let Marcia know. Thank you.
We'll now turn to the Mourner's Kaddish. Mourner's Kaddish is on page 33. We are reciting names that have been provided to us from our Yahrzeit list. After the names have been read aloud, I'll be receiving names from anyone in our congregation who'd like to share with us anyone who has recently lost a loved one or is observing a Yahrzeit for anyone. Our Yahrzeit list for this evening include the following names: Charles Schulman, Aaron Shapiro, Anita Kahn, Hilda Kipperman, Helen Martinez, Barbara Silverman, Sydney Sinkoff, Anna Cohen, George Davidoff, Sophie Namias, Bert Farber, Seth Scheider, Louis Fisher, William Offenberg, Julia Rabinowitz, Louis Cohen, Wilfred Martinez, Milton Rothberg, Abe Kogan, Ethel Tucker. Recently passed from our community are the following names: Philip Olstein, Stanley Toth, Steve Goldblum, Jacob George Tobel, Peter Lizama, Stan Perlman, David Schneider, Raphael Marcus, Florence Schneider, Sylvia Tannenbaum. Are there any other names anyone is observing a yahrzeit for here today or in the period of Shloshim Av?
Amanda Newman.
Amanda Newman,
What's his name? Thank you. Ben Rodriguez, Fred Kellogg,
Fred Kellogg,
Judy Merman,
Judy Merman,
McDonald Smith,
McDonald Smith,
Larry Bershad.
Larry Bershad. Are there any additional names anyone is observing a yahrzeit for in the period of Shloshim Av? No? Okay. If it is your custom, please rise. The Morris Kaddish is on page 33. Yitkadal ve'yitkadash shemei rabah v'alma divra hirutei v'yamnit ma'aputei v'chayechon v'yomechon u'chayei dechol beit Yisrael v'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen Yehei shmei rabah mivorach le'olam olamei almaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitzba'ar v'yitraman v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shamei v'kurusha b'reichu la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush v'chata v'nechamata dam yamran v'alma v'imru amen Yehei shlama rabba min shamaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen Oseh shalom v'imramav Hu yaseh shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort all who are bereaved, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated. We'll join together now for Adon Olam on page 34. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra v'yet nasa v'chevzo kol Azai melech shemo nikra v'yacharei kitlo takol levado yimloch noira v'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yiyeh betifara v'hu echad v'yein sheni lehamshilo lehachbira Beli reishi, beli tachli, velo haoz vehamizra, vehu eli, vechai goali, vetzor chevli, veyetzara, vehu nisi umanosli, menat kosi, beyom ekra, v'yahado akid ruchi. V'yet ishan v'ya'ira v'im ruchi geviati Adonai li velo ira. Good Shabbos, everyone. Shabbat shalom. May the Shabbos be full of menucha, be full of rest and peace, and let us say Amen. Amen. Would anyone like to volunteer for the Kiddush, giving the Kiddush, okay? Or anyone from the Motzi? Anyone would like to do the Motzi? We'll say it all together. So we'll join over for the Motzi as well as the Kiddush in just a moment.